How's it going, folks? I'm Dusfit, and this is the Garmin Forerunner 265, and this is the Garmin Venu 2 Plus. And both of these are going to be really good options when it comes to a mid-range, fitness-focused smartwatch from Garmin, where both of these can track plenty of different health metrics, both can track plenty of different sports, and both of these also do have bright and crispy AMOLED touchscreen displays. And another thing that's similar between these two is that both are around the same price range of around $400 to $450. So if they do share so many things in common, including the price, what exactly is the difference between these two watches, and why would you want to have one over the other? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's video. So Garmin has long had their Forerunner lineup of watches, and kind of as the name implies, these watches are aimed at runners, but they can also track plenty of other kinds of activities too, as well as track plenty of health data like your steps, your sleep, your heart rate, and all that good stuff. And then we have Garmin's Venu series line of watches, and they classify these as more smartwatches than sports-focused watches, where these have bright and crispy AMOLED displays, very similar to what you'd find in like an Apple Watch or a Samsung watch. They have touchscreens, and these watches are basically aimed for somebody who wants more of a smartwatch versus a sports watch. But with the introduction of the Forerunner 265, it kind of blurs the lines a little bit because the 265 comes with an AMOLED touchscreen display, just like what you find on the Venu 2 Plus. And this is kind of a big departure because Garmin's Forerunner lineup of watches, well, they've long had memory and pixel or transflected displays for years and years, and those displays do have some distinct advantages for sports, like really good readability outdoors, especially in bright conditions, as well as low power consumption, which means longer battery life. But Garmin has made some big strides with their AMOLED display technology, where these are not only very usable outdoors, they also get very decent battery life. So now with the AMOLED display and the touchscreen that's found on the 265, it may be kind of hard to decide between the 265 and the Venu 2 Plus because although they are kind of marketed differently, these watches actually still share a ton in common, but there are some differences in terms of what kind of sports that you can track, what kind of health and training feedback they provide, and there's also a pretty distinct feature on the Venu 2 Plus which isn't available on the 265. Now in this video, I'm primarily going to be talking about the Venu 2 Plus versus the Forerunner 265, mainly because they share nearly the exact same price, but just note that there are also the lower priced options of the Venu 2 and the Venu 2S, which have nearly the same fitness functionality as the Venu 2 Plus. So for the most part, you could also use the information in this video to compare to these two watches. And I am going to try to cover as many things as possible in this video, but if you have any questions about anything I didn't cover, feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section down below. And on your way down there, if you do happen to find the information in this video useful, also do me a favor and hit that like button. Okay, so to get started, the reason that these watches now share a lot more in common is that they both have bright and crispy AMOLED touchscreen displays. The memory and pixel or transflected displays Garmin's used on their Forerunner lineup still do have their place, but Garmin has been able to optimize AMOLED displays to not only be very readable and viewable outdoors in bright conditions, but they've also been able to optimize these to get very decent battery life for this kind of display technology. A lot of smartwatches with AMOLED displays, like let's say an Apple Watch or a Samsung Watch, typically only get like 1, 2, maybe 3 days of battery life, but Garmin has been able to get anywhere from around 4 days all the way up to a week or more, depending on your settings, with either the Venu 2 Plus or the Forerunner 265. And basically, the biggest impact that you're going to have on battery life is if you choose to use the always-on display setting, where it kind of dims to this super low brightness when you're not using it, and it brightens when you start interacting with it. The alternative is to not use the always-on display, and what happens here is that the display shuts off when you're not interacting with it, and to wake it up, all you do is either turn your wrist, tap on the screen, or just press a button. And if you choose to use the always-on display mode, battery life is actually pretty similar between these two, where you can probably expect to get around maybe 4 to 5 days out of them before you have to charge them. But if you disable the always-on display, this increases battery life quite a bit, where you can get up to 9 days out of the Venu 2 Plus and then up to nearly 2 weeks out of the Forerunner 265. And those are just kind of general guidelines though, but battery life will vary depending on how many outdoor activities that you track, your display brightness, as well as other factors like if you enable the SpO2 sensor for sleep. Now, in terms of display size, the Venu 2 Plus and the larger Forerunner 265 do have the same 1.3-inch display, but you also do have the option with the smaller Forerunner 265S, which has a 1.1-inch display. And then additionally, you do also have the regular Venu 2, which comes in 2 different sizes, with the Venu 2 having the same display as the Venu 2 Plus, and the Venu 2S, which has the same display size as the smaller Forerunner 265S. And then another thing that they share in common is that all of these also have a touchscreen, something that in the past was just found on Garmin's smartwatch-focused watches, but now has kind of become something that's been proven to be useful even with sports-focused watches as an additional way of interacting with your watch. And I'm definitely emphasizing the touchscreen as an additional way of interacting with your 265 because the 265 still has all 5 tried and true buttons just like Forerunners of the past. So it is truly your choice of how you want to interact with it depending on what you're doing. Like if you're navigating through long menus or using more smartwatch related features, you can use the touchscreen if you'd like, but you can also use the up and down buttons on the left-hand side, which do the exact same thing. Basically your choice. And the nice thing is too, you can even disable the touchscreen entirely if you want, but even on a per activity basis. So let's say you could have it enabled for something like hiking, but maybe not for running. The Venu 2 Plus also has a touchscreen and it also has physical buttons, but it has 3 physical buttons versus the 5-button configuration on the 265. And although it does make for a little bit cleaner looking design, it does make a little bit of a difference though when it comes to usability, when it comes to sports and fitness, where you will have to use the touchscreen to perform certain functions on the Venu 2 Plus, such as swiping through widgets, switching through data pages during an activity, as well as other functions like saving your activity. You'll still be able to start and pause your activity using the upper right-hand button, which is just like the Forerunner 265, but to save your activity, you'll actually have to use the touchscreen on the Venu 2 Plus. So when it comes to usability, for the most part, the 265 actually does have a bit of an advantage here since it has 5 physical buttons where you have the power and light button up here, you have the up and down buttons, you have the start and pause button up here, and then you have the back button down here, all in addition to the touchscreen. But with the Venu 2 Plus, you have the start and pause button up here as well as the back button down here, which are very similar to the 265, but it lacks the additional buttons on the left-hand side. However, the Venu 2 Plus has this third middle button on the right-hand side here, and this is for a feature that the 265 doesn't have, and this is because the Venu 2 Plus has a built-in microphone and speaker. So with the Venu 2 Plus, it has the ability to enable a voice assistant with your smartphone, but there are also some neat tricks to this other than just asking Siri to turn on the lights. Hey Siri, what's the weather today?
Is calling for thunderstorms today. Daytime temperatures will hover around 59 degrees, with overnight lows around 48.
So first off, you'll be able to access the voice assistant of your choice that's associated with whatever phone that you use. So if you're on an iPhone, you can access Siri or Google Assistant, and then with an Android phone, you can access either Google Assistant or, if you really want to, Bixby. And enabling a voice assistant is neat and all, but being able to access Siri when you're on an iPhone does have this kind of neat trick to it though. So you see, if you're on an iPhone and have it paired with any watch that's not an Apple Watch, you won't be able to actually reply to text messages via iMessage. You can receive the text messages, but you actually can't reply, and that's a feature that Apple's kind of locked down to just Apple Watches. But since you can access Siri with the Venu 2 Plus, you can actually use the voice assistant feature to send a text. You can't type out a message or anything like that, but hey, this is something that does enable you to send back a text. Text does fit. Sure, let's go for a run.
Your message to DeFit says, sure, let's go for a run. Do you want to send it or change it?
Send it.
It's sent.
And the same functionality is also going to be there if you're using an Android phone with the Venu 2 Plus, where you can also use the voice assistant to send and reply to texts. But with either the Venu 2 Plus or the Forerunner 265, if you do have these paired with an Android phone, you will also be able to reply to text messages with predefined responses that you can set up in Garmin Connect. And then with calls with the Venu 2 Plus, you'll also have the ability to take calls and speak directly through the watch itself with either an Android phone or an iPhone. So there's really no difference there, but just note that you do have to have your phone in range for this to work because the Venu 2 Plus doesn't have cellular capabilities, but the Forerunner 265 doesn't have it either. With the Forerunner 265, you will be able to answer and decline calls from the watch, but to take the call, you'll actually be speaking on your phone itself. So while the Venu 2 Plus has a full-blown microphone and speaker, the 265 has more like a beeper, I guess you could say, where these are going to be beeps or chirps with stuff like alerts. But with the Venu 2 Plus, since it has an actual speaker, you get very nice tones and chimes throughout the interface. And then another trick with the Venu 2 Plus' speaker is that you can actually play music from that speaker. Now, it is a speaker that's on a watch, so the quality is probably what you expect from a speaker that's on such a small device, but hey, it works and it's actually not horrendous for what it is. Oh, and I guess that brings up another good subject, is that with both the Venu 2 Plus as well as the Forerunner 265, both of these do have the ability to store music on the watch itself for offline listening using music streaming services like Spotify, Deezer, as well as Amazon Music, and both of these also can pair directly to a pair of Bluetooth earbuds. And then for some other things that these watches share in common from the hardware end of things is that both of these do use industry standard bands. They all have a 5 ATM water resistance rating, so they're going to be perfectly fine for showering or swimming with them. But the Venu 2 Plus is probably a bit more fashion forward, I guess you could say, where it does have some stainless steel elements to it, which makes it feel a little bit more fancy. The Forerunner 265, although it's not bad looking by any means, is a little bit more functional in its design. But that metal bezel on the Venu 2 Plus actually does have another trick other than just looks. That metal bezel actually allows the Venu 2 Plus to record an ECG or electrocardiogram. And this is actually a feature that wasn't originally available on the Venu 2 Plus when it first launched. It was actually updated later a little bit down the road once the device actually got FDA approval, but this is probably one of the biggest feature differences between these two watches. And by the way, this isn't something that can just be added to the 265 because the 265 actually doesn't have the necessary hardware. And that actually brings us to the heart rate sensor. So both of these use the same generation of Garmin's Elevate heart rate sensor. So accuracy is going to be the same on both of these, where these are going to be quite accurate sensors for most activities. The difference though is that the Venu 2 Plus does have this little metal ring around the sensor, which is one of the necessary hardware components for the ECG readings. But other than the ability to record an ECG, the health tracking features are going to be pretty much identical between these two, where both these will track your heart rate 24 hours a day. Both these can track your blood oxygen saturation levels. Both can track your stress. Both can track your respiration rate, and both can track calories, and both can also track your sleep. And then on the activity tracking side of things, again, very similar between these two, where both of these can track your steps, both can track your floors climbed throughout the day, since both of these do have built-in altimeters. Both of these have Garmin's body battery metric, which gives you an indication of your energy levels throughout the day. And then both of these also can track your intensity minutes, which you can think of as kind of basically the time that you're spending doing vigorous activity. But where these start to differ though is in terms of the training feedback that these watches provide, where the Venu 2 Plus, it can provide your VO2 max for running as well as your fitness age, which it basically is a metric that Garmin provides that's supposed to be a little bit more relatable way of determining your comparable fitness level. And the Forerunner 265 also has these metrics, but the 265 builds in a lot more. So it'll not only provide your VO2 max for running, but it also can do this for cycling because the 265 compared to cycling power meters. And then it also has a race predictor, which gives you times that you could potentially achieve for common running race instances based on your running history. There's also a training status widget, which gives you an idea of how your recent training is making an impact on your performance and how it's progressing, where it takes in numerous factors like your VO2 max trends, your HRV status, as well as other factors like your exercise load focus, as well as recovery time. And another feature that the Forerunner 265 has that isn't available on the Venu 2 Plus is Garmin's training readiness feature. And this is different than training status, where training status is more about how your training is progressing, where with training readiness, this is more about how ready you are for your next training session. So this takes in factors like your sleep, your current recovery time, HRV status, exercise load, sleep history, as well as stress history to give you an idea of if and when to train next. And then I already kind of alluded to this earlier with both training status as well as training readiness, but the 265 also comes with the HRV status feature. So the HRV status feature tracks your HRV or heart rate variability trends over time. Now, HRV or heart rate variability is different than just your heart rate, where heart rate is just how many times your heart is beating per minute, but HRV is the measure of the actual time in between each heartbeat. And this has become a really valuable metric, especially recently for athletes, as kind of a data point to assess how well they're recovered as well as how ready they are for training. Now, although the Venu 2 Plus doesn't have the HRV status feature, it actually does have the health snapshot feature, where you can take on-demand measurements of your heart rate, breathing rate, blood oxygen saturation level, as well as your HRV. So it's not an automatically tracked metric like what's available on the 265, but you still can capture this data, just more in a manual manner. And then when it comes to sport profiles, this portion's a little bit complicated because you'd think that the Forerunner 265 actually has more sport profiles because it's a more sports-focused watch, but that's not necessarily the case, at least at this point in time. So both the Forerunner 265 and the Venu 2 Plus, they have all the common sport profiles that you can imagine, like running both indoors and outdoors, cycling both indoors and outdoors. Both of them have pool swimming. Both of them have plenty of gym profiles, as well as plenty of outdoor recreation profiles. And then we have the Forerunner 265, which comes with some additional profiles like an ultra run and trail run profile. It also comes with some additional cycling profiles, and then it also can track open water swimming as well as triathlon. Where it starts to get a little bit odd though is that the Venu 2 Plus then has a indoor climbing profile, a bouldering profile, snowshoeing, tennis, as well as a few others that the 265 doesn't have, and I don't necessarily understand why they wouldn't be on there. Oh, and then the Venu 2 Plus also does have a golf profile. Now, the activity profiles, they do change from time to time based on software updates, but those are the activity profiles, at least at the present moment. And then another difference between these two is that the Forerunner 265 has a bit more advanced satellite chipset for recording outdoor activities. So with either of these, they have built-in GPS, so you'll be able to go out and record your speed, distance and location with either of these watches without you having to bring your phone with you. But where this differs though is that the Forerunner 265 has what they call a dual band or multi-band satellite chipset. So what this technology does is that it allows the 265 to access two different satellite frequencies at one time. And where this is going to be beneficial is going to be in environments where satellite signals can kind of get iffy, like around really tall buildings, steep canyon walls, or if you're under a lot of really heavy tree cover. And in those sort of situations, satellite signals can actually bounce off of those objects, which can lead to inaccurate data. And that technology aims to get better accuracy in those sort of situations. Now, it's not to say that the Venu 2 Plus is inaccurate by any means. It's actually very accurate. I haven't had any issues with it, but if you are planning on doing activities in more challenging environments like I just talked about, that's where the 265 may be better. And then another sports-focused feature that is available on the 265 that isn't available on the Venu 2 Plus is that the 265 also can collect wrist-based running power as well as being able to collect advanced running dynamics. So with the Venu 2 Plus for running, it'll collect stats like your speed and distance, of course, but along with that, it'll also collect your cadence as well as your stride length. But with the 265, it also can collect additional running dynamics like your vertical oscillation, ground contact time, as well as your running power. And with these additional metrics, you can use these to better assess your running form. And then with running power, this is an additional metric beyond just pace that can be used to gauge your effort, which can be useful in situations like where there's hills or if there's a lot of wind. And by the way, these metrics can be collected either directly on the wrist on the 265 or from an accessory like the HRM Pro Plus heart rate strap. And that actually kind of brings us to the difference in external sensor support. So with the Venu 2 Plus, it can connect to external heart rate sensors, speed and cadence sensors for cycling, foot pods running, temperature sensors, as well as Garmin Vario radar and lights. But with the Forerunner 265, in addition to all those sensors that I just talked about, it also can pair with power meters for cycling. It can connect to Garmin's RD pod, which also can provide more advanced running dynamics. It can connect to smart bike trainers, and it also can connect to e-bikes, and it also has extended display support, which is basically this kind of neat feature which allows you to mirror the data that's being collected on your watch with a compatible Garmin bike computer. Oh, and then for one last thing I wanted to cover is that the 265 also does have the ability to load in routes for breadcrumb navigation when the Venu 2 Plus doesn't have this feature. So what you can do here is that you can load up a route in Garmin Connect and then transfer it to your 265, which you can then use to navigate, where it'll basically just kind of give you an idea of whether you're on your planned route or not. But with the Venu 2 Plus, it doesn't have this capability, unfortunately, but it does have a navigate profile where you can save locations and then navigate to those locations with that breadcrumb style navigation. But it's kind of this standalone activity profile, which is different than the 265, which has these navigation features built directly into some outdoor profiles like hiking. But again, with the Venu 2 Plus, you can't load in a pre-planned route. So when it comes to the Venu 2 Plus or the Forerunner 265, although they share the same AMOLED touchscreen displays and a very similar price tag, there's actually quite a few differences between these two watches. They're still both very capable watches, both on the health side of things as well as the fitness side of things, but there's certainly reasons why you may want to choose one over the other. And really, the biggest differences being that the Venu 2 Plus has the built-in speaker and microphone as well as ECG support versus a lot more training feedback and sports features on the Forerunner 265, as well as a little bit better usability. Anyhow, if you happen to find the information in this video to be useful, do me a favor and just quickly hit that like button down below. And if you're interested in more comparison videos just like this or other fitness and sports tech videos, also make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.